Chapter 23. Life is Play. What is the meaning of life? Many people would say, I haven't got a clue, which on the surface seems like a fair and unpretentious answer. You may not be aware of it, but you have, consciously or otherwise, placed a meaning of some kind on your life. And that meaning is expressed in what you spend your life pursuing. A person who knowingly destroys his health with dangerous illegal drugs has decided that life isn't worth preserving. A person who stands on a street corner shouting to the world about the wrath of God has decided to give himself completely in the service of a deity. A person with a big house full of expensive treasures has decided that wealth is what matters. A person with an extensive library of books believes in the pursuit of knowledge. The list goes on. Unless you spend your whole life standing completely still, then you have injected some kind of purpose into it. It could be one particular aim or a mixture of pursuits. Since no one ever came along and said, "Here is the meaning of life," you took it upon yourself to get on with the business of living, and living for something. But maybe it's not true that no one told you the meaning of life. Maybe something was being said, but you never consciously took notice. For instance, you're born into life in the Western world. It's all playtime for a few years. Then, at age 5, your parents hand you over to the education system. This system instructs you with information that will help you survive in later life. The aim, according to the education system, is to be as smart as possible, get as qualified as possible, so that you can get the best job possible and make as much money as possible. As you progress through school, 6 or more hours of your life, 5 days per week, are devoted to this goal. The pursuit is done in competition with those around you. Somebody's got to be first in class and somebody's got to be last. Life becomes a game of survival or success of the fittest. I'm a realist, and in the real world, not everyone is born equal. Some are imbued with a greater capacity for intelligence than others. Some are physically stronger than others. Some are more coordinated than others. Some are more creative than others. Some are more beautiful than others. The harsh truth, visible across the whole animal kingdom, is that nature stratifies itself. There are winners and losers. But competition is only half the story. In prehistoric times, the life of the tribe depended upon working together and sharing resources. Each new life was valued for what it would contribute to the whole. Contrast this with today, where each individual competes against others for gainful employment. All the way through school, he has a sense of how unnecessary he is, because he knows there are more people than jobs. Instead of collaborating for the benefit of the tribe as the hunter-gatherers did, we are individually alienated and set against each other. And in a world where material values reign supreme, the winners are those with the most expensive cars and the biggest houses. So many of us unthinkingly subscribe to these values, not realizing that whatever you devote your life to becomes your life's meaning. Whatever path you choose, you should walk it consciously. I played the competitive game because I had to, because the modern world is the way it is and you either sink or swim. I don't regret for a second investing 3 years of my life to obtain a university qualification that allowed me to pursue a career in computing. Once qualified, I recall that I applied for 2 particular jobs simultaneously. One of them was a much higher paying job than the other, but a lot less fun. If I had been offered both jobs, I would have chosen money over fun, because that's what material values dictate. That was the decision that never asks the question, what am I living for? I'm relieved that I was only offered the fun job, because back then I didn't have the sense to say, I don't like the way modern Western life works. I'm going to live it with other priorities. Look how many of us spend 40 hours or more a week exhausting ourselves doing something we hate. We assume we need all that money, but if we allowed ourselves to think outside the box of the hive mind of society, we might see ways to change our lives. It might be as simple as reconsidering our addiction to lottery tickets or how many electronic gadgets we buy. I personally went as far as questioning my need for the ownership of a car. Almost all of my life's activities take place within my local area, and since I didn't have a family to support, I realized that I could do almost everything by bicycle. I could save a lot of money, maintain my health, and reduce some of the admin of life. There was nothing to lose and everything to gain. So I made the move from 4 wheels to 2. I realize it's not practical for everyone to give up cars. But our lives are soaked in unnecessary materialism of one kind or another. Hypnotized by our television screens, we buy, then work so we can buy. And it rarely seems to hit home that our way of life is like a prison without bars. I have a 5 days a week job, like most people, but if I didn't enjoy it, I would be asking to have it reduced to 4 days, or maybe even 3. And yet there are people who grasp at every opportunity to work overtime, despite doing a job they hate. In the great pursuit of wealth, your life can easily become something that is barely fit to be lived. You may not think you know the meaning of life, but the zeitgeist has been dictating a meaning to you your whole life, and not a very healthy one. He who dies with the most toys wins. The reason why it's so easy to become materialistic is because of the value we place on material. But what is the material universe? It's like a frequency your consciousness is tuned to. It has no more solidity than a video game. The pursuit of wealth in the real world is the same in principle as scoring points in a game. In life, you can use your wealth to buy a new car. In a game, when you accrue enough points, you might have the choice of equipping your character with a variety of power-ups. The game ends and the points vanish. Likewise, life ends and all contact with your wealth is gone forever. Oh sure, your wealth still exists in the world, and you may feel a sense of satisfaction in leaving it to your sons and daughters when you die. But let's take a look at the way of life you're perpetuating. You're born. You have a few years in which to enjoy a childhood. Then the business of making money begins. At some point you may get married and start a family. Instead of enjoying your money sensibly while looking after your family, the system dictates that you must make more and more money to invest in your children's futures. So you work harder and harder, thinking about your kids needing cars and college later on. Now there is no room left for you to have a life of your own, to pursue what you want to do. This kind of altruism may sound commendable on the surface, but in living like this, what are you really offering your kids? A chance to live in exactly the same manner you're living, to have a brief childhood followed by a long life of slavery to the system, as they seek to do for their own children what you did for them. In principle, it's good to labour for your family's future, but it's important that this doesn't get out of control. There is a fine line between planning for the future and simply being enslaved by the future. It's important to understand that the future, being the future, never arrives. Tomorrow never comes, as the saying goes. Wealth, instead of being used for what it is, a means to an end, becomes the food for an insatiable imaginary monster called the future, who must be fed by you, then by your sons, then by their sons, into infinity. All the while, everybody's thinking, "We're getting there, we're going to make it." But nobody has any clue what "there" means. People blindly invest their time increasing their wealth, with no sense of a practical limit on what they need. Later, they die with lots of unspent money, unable to get back the time they wasted amassing it. If we want to live a life that has any meaning, We need to first have a life. And that means living in the now instead of being a slave to the future. It may sound selfish to claim the right to enjoy life in the now, but if you deny that right to yourself, you perpetuate the system that denies it to your children too. Imagine going to the cinema, and right before the lights go out, an usher walks in front of the screen and says, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take a moment to tell you what this film is about." He goes on to provide a rough plot summary, leaving out only the ending. "Now that I've saved you the trouble of watching the movie, we'll just roll the last 5 minutes." You would feel cheated, wouldn't you? Why? Because you know that the purpose of watching a movie is not merely to get to the end. The purpose is to experience each moment of the whole for its own sake. When you watch a movie, you are getting something out of every part of it. The same is true when you read a novel or listen to a song. And the same is true of life, for your life is a collection of experiences laid out in exactly the same manner. It's not about where you're going, but about what you're doing each step along the way. One of the most fundamental reflections about life that I can make is, I am the experience of consciousness. The purpose of life, then, is to have experience. But what experience in particular? Well, does it have to be only one? Life offers a great deal of variety, and maybe that's the point. Ask yourself what it is you want to do with your life. Okay then, create that experience. But what do we do instead? We buy into the con that the universe is three-dimensionally solid, that matter is what matters. Then we work long and hard to claim ownership of a little piece of the physical world for ourselves. Believing it to be fundamentally real, we fail to realize that we can own nothing. All we can do is experience. Imagine a man who lives in an overcrowded city full of buildings so tall that he can barely see the sky. He has a high-paying job that he hates, drives a flashy car, and owns a luxurious apartment filled with expensive treasures. Then imagine a man who owns almost nothing, lives in a small house made of palm branches, works for a pittance as a fisherman. He wakes up every morning to the view of a spectacular beach and ocean, and as he goes about his working day, he enjoys the sensation of the boat bobbing upon the waves, the feel of the warm sun on his skin, and the smell of salt water in his nostrils. One of these men is considered rich and the other poor. But from a deeper point of view, possessions are nothing more than experiences in waiting. If I buy an expensive car, I am paying for the repeatable experience of driving that car and enjoying the feeling of status that it gives me. If I purchase an expensive ornament for my home, I am paying for the repeatable experience of the pleasure of gazing upon it. That's what ownership boils down to. All of life is, in a sense, holographic. Notice how the poor man owns the experience of gazing upon the ocean, a repeatable pleasure utterly denied to the rich man, who wakes up each morning in his expensive apartment without a view. When you really understand what ownership is at its core, it's not so clear who is rich and who is poor. This illustrates the folly of the mindless pursuit of wealth. But take care that you don't make the opposite mistake of demonizing wealth. If you happen to be lucky financially, there is nothing noble about forcing yourself to live an ascetic life. Asceticism can easily turn into just another ego-driven activity, where you get to feel superior to all those greedy rich folks. Pleasure is pleasure, whether it comes from spending money or not. So if you've got money, enjoy the experience of using it. If you haven't got it, enjoy whatever other experiences come your way. The key is to understand that everything in life boils down to experience. When I make decisions that affect my life, all I'm doing is reshaping the hologram, creating new experiences. And there will come a time when the collection of memory fragments known as the life of Darryl Sloan terminates. But what does that matter to me? I am the infinite, and Darryl Sloan is merely one of my manifestations. From the perspective of the time-bound ego, look at how slippery the reality of the present is. No sooner have you grasped it than it becomes the past. The apparent solidity of the present moment becomes nothing more solid than a stored memory in the blink of an eye. Think of a cherished memory from the distant past that you wish you could relive. That memory is no further from you today than it was the very second after you lived it. When we ask ourselves, what is the meaning of life? That's usually the ego asking if there is a special reason for its individual existence, or wondering if it's supposed to be doing something in particular with this life. But when you ask that question, see yourself as the infinite, having an infinitude of experiences past, present, and future. The question, does God have a plan for my life? Or, is there a particular life plan for this incarnation? Takes on quite a different spin, doesn't it? As the infinite, I am every person who ever gave his life heroically, every person who ever killed another in cold blood, every loving husband, every rapist, every person who ever lived long or died tragically in childhood. There is only one. In full awareness that you are the infinite, what sort of an experience should you choose for yourself in this life? I think the truth is, we knew the answer to that question when we were children, before the system got hold of us and molded us into its image of what a person should be. There is something simple and profound in watching a child at play. We're told to grow up, get serious, and start making lots of money, but that's all misdirection. A kid knows what it's all about without having to be told. He's just creating with his toys, drinking in the wonderful cocktail of the holographic experience. A child who builds a sandcastle on the beach knows he cannot take it home with him and cares nothing for the fact that the sea will wash it away later. Yet he continues to build, not bothered about the futility of it. The act of building needs no more justification than the creation and enjoyment of experience in the now. How many children have been exploited because of the pursuit of wealth? How much of the planet has been devastated by human greed? How many wars have been started because someone in a position of power decided he wanted to own a bigger slice of the hologram? We are living in a materialist paradigm that is not only wrong on a purely intellectual level, but its aberrant nature is revealed in its self-destructive consequences. The infinite has no ultimate purpose. I state this confidently because I recognize that the idea of purpose is connected to the erroneous view that time has an ending. Time is just the present. The universe, as a temporal manifestation of the infinite, has a visible purpose, the motion of all life towards survival and well-being. Our purpose as creatures, then, lies in flowing with that arrangement. Parents know this intuitively, in the joy they experience through their children. Doctors feel it when they help the sick. Scientists sense it when they improve the world with new discoveries. But don't make the mistake of taking that sense of purpose too seriously. Ultimately, the manifest universe will come to an end, only to begin anew. Adults, raised to serve self-centered material values, perpetuate madness. Children are the truly sane ones, because they haven't yet been manipulated to forget the truth. Life is play. The beauty in this tragedy is that you can reclaim that truth for yourself anytime you want. The trick is to notice it.